to communicate your data effectively. There's many things that we can do to have a good presentation. You have good body language, you're standing up straight. You want to make it very, very impactful and like wow the audience. But, I will just go through one thing that I think is very important. I've seen many hundreds of presentations in my time as a researcher. And I did notice one thing is that people didn't really explain their data properly. It was actually quite confusing, and it's kind of sad because the data is often the most important key point of a presentation, and sometimes the key message or the most important message is just lost. So giving you some tips on how to present this better, I think it's actually quite an easy framework. But, Kelsey, why don't you have a go at explaining this data here?
Okay, I would say it remains at 20,000 to 24,000 points before April. At the end of April, there's a plummet and then bounce back to around 20,000 points.
Yeah. So I think what Chelsea says is actually what I think maybe 80-90% of people would do, even native English speakers. Like that's probably the exact example that people would give. You might be familiar with this data because it's your data. But actually, you have to remember the audience is seeing this for the very first time. They need some background to this data. So here's my framework for explaining graphs. So yes, you need to give them some background. And one thing to imagine is just describe everything in your graph without the actual data. An example would be, this graph shows the performance of the Taiwan Stock Exchange since the start of this year in the number of points. And that's it. That's all you need to do. Just the background and summarize the title, the X and Y axes, and perhaps any legends that there are. Next, you want to just describe the overall trend. So usually some data, there's some trend because that's why we're presenting. There's something important there to show. So an example would be the stock market has increased by 7.28% since the start of the year. And that's the overall trend that we see. Next, we want to kind of separate our data into different parts. And this will depend on your specific data because every piece of data is different. So are there any key changes or sudden ups and downs that are there? And these are the points which you want to focus on. So you want to look at the key changes to the data and then also provide some reasons. So here, I think an example sentence would be the stock exchange fluctuated but was stable between maybe 22,000 to 24,000 points for the first 3 months of the year. However, there was a sudden plunge at the start of April, likely due to the global tariff issues from the US. However, the market rebounded in the next 2 weeks and then steadily recovered since the end of April to over 24,000 points. And number 4 is the summary. This is also the key point, is why are you showing this data to your audience? What's important about this data? So you need to maybe tell them, what's the future plan for this? And perhaps maybe link it to the next slide and have a good transition to the next slide. So again, this is important or very specific and unique for your own piece of data. And the final thing about this is verb tenses. So I think all my students love verb tenses.
Really?
No. Unfortunately, verb tense is a very important part of English. There's past, present, future. And unfortunately, there's no verb tense in Chinese. So this is probably one struggle that a lot of my students have, is using verb tenses. So for data, I guess I'll give you 2 quick tips. Is if you're talking about the past, it makes sense to use past tense. So this could be last year, last quarter, last month, yesterday. This is all in the past, so you should be using past tense. Present perfect is used to describe anything up until now. So it could be today, this week, this month, this quarter, this year. Past tense and present perfect tense, they are used to describe different types of data depending on what you want to say.